I'll be assisting the doctor today, so I'm going to sit because I'm tired. But,
why are you assisting the doctor today?
Because he is technology impaired. I'm proud of it.
I'm not proud of it.
Well, you're not ashamed of it. By the way, before we start, did anyone order this from me last week? Somebody wanted one, and I can't remember who it was. $5. They gave me. Is that you?
Yes.
Here you go. Will you pass that back there? Thank you.
Yeah, I gave you $5.
Yeah, well, there's your book. Never let it be said. Okay, a couple announcements. Wheeling Reeds has started. Now, tomorrow night we're having the Vagabond Kitchen. The Wheeling Reeds cocktail will be unveiled by Chef Welsh at 7 p.m. That'll be based on Heat and Light, which is the Wheeling Reeds book by Jennifer Hay. Next week, Dr. Chuck Julian will be here to tell us, he's going to guide us in a quiz on Warwood trivia. So that'll be on the 13th of June. Dr. Javersak will be back on July 11th to host the return of It's Wheeling History. Remember we did that a few years ago. We had a 3-day event. This is only going to be the 1 day. It's going to be more like a history beat. You get a question wrong, the next person gets it right, you're eliminated. And there could be teams of 1 person or 2 people. So if you want to participate in the competition, let me know. Okay, so we're gonna, we've lost a lot of people this past week. And so we're going to dedicate the program today to them. Bud Seabright and Harold Vitale, whose seat is reserved, he will be right there. Grace Norton, you can see her in that group picture. John Roman died. He used to present here quite a bit. And Dr. Hank Kettler, who I confess I don't remember, but I was told by Linda Cummins. He also passed. And was pardon me? Bud, I had Bud first. I said Bud. Yeah. So this program is dedicated to Dr. Julian. And next week, hopefully, I will have with me the new historical review, which is largely about Warwood, including an article written by Dr. Julian. So the evolution of Watch Us Grow. Hope to have that ready. Almost there. And there's Dr. Javersak getting ready.
Who's that?
Getting ready for It's Wheeling History. Okay. So that brings us, well, I'll let you tell me which one you want to look at first. Here's Dr. David Javersak.
That one.
Okay.
Okay. Now we got to get an early start. There are 166 people in the Wheeling Hall of Fame, so we'll start with the first one. No? Oh, that's right. Jean Finstein says she has to be someplace. What'd you say? Tuesday? Next Tuesday? Yeah. Okay. The Wheeling Hall of Fame goes back to 1977 when it was created by the City Council. The first inductions were in 1980, so this is our 43rd year. And the present board, you can see behind me, and I want to start with that because the officers, two of whom are here today, wonderful folks. This is maybe the best committees I have ever been on. Bob DeFrancis is absolutely wonderful. Gene is the most up-to-date, detailed, onto-it person that I know. And Phil Stahl, who's not here, who works for the city of Wheeling, is just marvelous. The board is divided by 6 different categories. There are 18 members of the board, and we're all given an assignment. And the executive committee also has assignments, and you'll see that 2 of those, the chair and the vice chair, are also committee chairs. And they didn't know what to do with me, so they gave me a chairperson too. I want you to know that the board takes seriously what is done with the Hall of Fame. I mean, these aren't things that we take idly. We actually spend some good amount of time talking about and making sure we're making the right decisions. We haven't had anybody yet that we've had to take off the Hall of Fame, as some other halls have had, because partly we have done our homework, okay? But you don't get on the Hall of Fame by having a nomination put out. The board sits down and figures out who they're going to be. And I'll just give you one example of how we did it. In 2017, the committee and I, and the committee's here, Jay Fry, Phil Stahl, and I, we always like to meet where there was either food to eat or beverages to drink. So we are at the, what's it called? Ye Old Alpha. And we just sat down and we're having a beverage before dinner, and we're thinking, who are we going to nominate this year? Who are we going to do? And about that point, door opens and Judge Fred Stamp walks in, stops at the table, exchanges pleasantries to us, and says goodbye and goes on his way. And I said, gentlemen, there's our first choice. And that's how we did it. I mean, we you know, he was on the list. We keep a list of people who we think should be on there. Now let me give you an example of how this is done. There are 34 people in the first category, business and industries. Public services, 25. Religion and education, 26. Fine arts, 29. Philanthropy is the smallest, 23. So dig deep. Sports and athletics, 29. Okay. Now, of those 166, only 33 are still living. And 1, 2, 3, 4 of those that I can see are here today. Mrs. Nutting, Mr. Villamagna, Mr. Magruder, and Doug Huff. Okay? And come to board. I really don't think they needed an applause. They're already in the Hall of Fame. They don't need further recognition, okay? But there's some interesting aspects of this Hall of Fame, and I am not going to give you individual biographies. I want to talk about the thing as a whole. I am a historian, I have been a historian, and you can do a lot by teaching history by using different things. I used to teach history of Wheeling at the Greenwood Cemetery with some students. And you can do it here. For example, this is an old town, and let me see if I can do this politely. In the last almost 100 years, it's been a town which has continued to lose population, and the industries have changed drastically. That's what history is all about. It's about change. It could be good, bad, it could be indifferent, but it's change, okay? For example, of these 166 people at the induction ceremony, 99 of them were already deceased. Okay, what's that show? That shows that the community's been around here a long time, and a lot of the movers and shakers are okay. Could you go to the business, industry, and professions? Okay, I want you to look at this list, and one of the things that you're going to run into are names from the past. Mifflin Marsh, for example. Stuart Block, John Frizzell, who came to Wheeling in, what, 1820s? 1820s, 30s? Okay. Could you go to the next page?
One second, let me focus. Okay.
Is there a couple of things? Vance Church, a Stifle, Andrew Sweeney, mayor of Wheeling for 9 terms, I believe. You notice the beards, okay? 62% of the people in this section of the Wheeling Hall of Fame were born before 1900. Okay? 64% were born before 1920. Since 1940, could you go back to the next page? The previous page? Since 1940, how many have been born? 1. Lisa Allen. That's all. What's that tell you? It tells me that some of the businesses in Wheeling haven't grown. There's no steel. There's the tobacco is not even owned by the Block Brothers anymore. March is gone. The pottery's gone. Okay. That's one of the aspects of that. There are only 8 inductees who were born after 1950. Okay. B.E. Taylor, Carla Booz, Lisa Allen, the O'Brien brother and sister, John Corbett, Mark Harshman, and Joanne Stamp, who will be inducted this Saturday. Okay. The range of the living members of the Wheeling Hall of Fame go from 62 to 96. And 96 is Father O'Brien, James O'Brien, who will be added to the Hall of Fame on Saturday. Below, oldest is Mayor Fahey, who's 95. And then below that is Clyde Campbell, who's 93. Okay. Could you go to the fine arts, I think it is. The oldest person, the oldest person inducted, who was still alive, okay, and, let's see in here, yes, yeah. Everett Lee, black fellow who was in music, conducting, and so on. He was 102 when he was inducted. He died just last year, I think, at the age of 105. Born in Wheeling and lived his later years in Sweden, I believe. Okay. The youngest person, again, alive, who was inducted, was John Corbett. And I don't know if John Corbett is...
Top row.
Yeah, top row. Okay, John Corbett, who was an actor and whatever. Okay. But their shortest lifespan, you could be in the Hall of Fame. You don't have to be an old guy to be in the Hall of Fame. There's a musician by the name of Chu Berry, who was killed in an automobile crash in 1941. He was 33. Noah Lindsley, who is on the Hall of Fame. I'm just going to see if Ms. Finstein has a look on her face. Technically, Noah Lindsley should not be on the Hall of Fame, but that's a story for another time. He was 40 when he died. Judy Herndon was 39. Okay, and there was a woman by the name of Mary Snyder Efron, who's in the business and industries. This was a woman who developed and worked on things like the PKU test for kids and a lot of these medical things that were used, that we now use for children before they leave the hospital for immunization and so on. She was only 41 when she died. There are 15 people in the Hall of Fame who were born before 1850. A couple examples. J.L. Stifel, Stifel Calico Works. Samuel Bloch, Augustus Pollock. You notice another theme there, kind of German influence? You'll see a lot of that in the early names because of that. But there are some that you won't see. One of the first self-made millionaire in Wheeling, owned a lot of stuff like Mozart Park and the Incline, and was involved in the bridge, and he had a big brewery. Henry Schmulbach. Why is Henry Schmulbach not there? Well, Henry Schmulbach has some what we call baggage. He was acquitted for the murder, but he was on trial for it. And he was also associated with, because of all the liquor and the bars, with too much involvement with the unseemly type part of life, gambling, prostitution, that kind of thing. So he's not on there. But other ones that might be on there before that, Earl W. Ogilvy is before 1850. Archibald Campbell, who ran the Intelligencer and was very big in the election of Lincoln, although Lincoln did very poorly in West Virginia. Now, 166 members. How many women? Not very many. Well, not very many to be exact is 41. That percentage-wise, that's 24.7%. But it gets even better when you look at it. Of the 41, from 1980 to 2000, only 11. Okay? Since 2000, 30. Since 2015, 20. Okay. By category, could we go to the philanthropy? By category. Notice, this is philanthropy. And some of these names you're very familiar with. Phyllis Beneke, Beneke Scholarships. The Sands Crest, for example. The Shanks over here. So there are, this makes up, and the newest member of philanthropy is Joanne Stanton. Okay. Now, somebody said, I mentioned that, and this is all, yeah, they're spending their husband's inheritance. I said, no, some of these women had it on their own. For example, she never married. She never married. She never married. I don't think she ever married. Okay? So, no, that's not there. Now, one of the reasons the percentages are so much lower in the early part as opposed to more recently, remember in the late 19th 19th, early 20th century, women were not involved in things. They were, they couldn't vote, they couldn't do a lot of things. It's very uncommon for that to occur, and that's, in more recent times, it's likely that you will have more women. How many black women? 1. And that comes on Saturday. Ann Thomas. Okay? The number of people of African descent in the Hall of Fame, total of 8, percentage 4.8%. Well, that doesn't sound very good. Well, West Virginia is the 3rd whitest state in the Union. The only states with a higher percentage of whites are Maine, Vermont, and then West Virginia. And what's unusual about that is to have a percentage that high in a state this far south. In fact, there are fewer African Americans in West Virginia today, or in the census of 2020, than in the census of 1950. And I say that because there are several people in this room whose first census would have been 1950. And I'm not saying anything, Doug, about you or Mr. Magruder over there, or Mr. DeFrancis, or myself, or well, there's my lovely wife back there. But you were at the first census. No, she couldn't. Okay. The first black person, James White, who was a pharmacist and worked improving lives of everybody, wasn't added until 1986. And the next person, or 2 people actually, 1998. And that was Chewberry and Philip Reed. Philip Reed was the principal up at the old Lincoln School. But since 2015, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people of African descent who have been added. And in 2019, there were 3 who were inducted on that day, okay, including Everett Lee. Interestingly enough, when you take a look at categories, there are 2 categories in which you will find no black Americans. One of them is philanthropy. And the other one, we had a discussion the other day that if we ask you, most of you would not come up with this. And the other category is sports and athletics. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's, we naturally assume that, they're going to, that's not the case. That's not the case. Now, one of in terms of Jewish members, about 3.6%. People like Pollack and Rosemary Front, Art Rybeck, Levinson, Lisa Allen, and so on. And you might say, well, that's not a very big number either. Until you think about in the entire state of West Virginia, according to a friend of mine who happens to be the rabbi in Wheeling, there are only about 1,200 Jews in the state of West Virginia. So to have 3.6%, pretty good. Okay. Now, I'll tell you what else is interesting. See, one of the interesting groups in Wheeling, some of you probably have never heard of. It's called the Blue Pencil Club. It's been around since, okay, that's what I was looking for, was Jean's shaking her head, because the Blue Pencil Club is a male essay club. Okay?
Male only.
That's what I said. Male only. It's been around since 1895. It's not unusual. In late 19th century Wheeling, you had essay clubs for men. There was a Shakespeare club in Wheeling, for example. But there are 5.4% of the people in the Wheeling Hall of Fame are also in the Blue Pencil Club. Okay. Now, let me give you another little statistic, little fact here. It's what I call the Walnut Avenue and the Wheeling Hall of Fame. And I live on Walnut Avenue. And well, in fact, we don't have to do all of Walnut Avenue. Let's just do the first 2 blocks of Walnut Avenue. So as you come off of Route 88, right at the temple, and you turn right to get on the road, the first house you'll see on your left, which faces Route 88, used to be lived in by a family called Stamps, Fred and Joanne, so that's 2. You come up to the next intersection, and on your left is number 14. That's Rosemary Front. Diagonally across the street is number 15. And that's where Wes Wagner used to live. He's in the Hall of Fame. Next to Wes Wagner's house is number 17. And that's where Helen Gaither lived. So we got 5. Okay. Number 15, the house where Wes Wagner lived, is now occupied by Alice and David Javersak, who was on the board of this. And you go up the street a little more, and you run into 30-something, and you run into the McCluskey family. And Kim McCluskey, you'll see, is also on the Hall of Fame. And directly back where Rosemary Front used to live is where Tom Round lives, and Tom Round will be the next appointment to the Hall of Fame. So we've got this place covered. You know, when I introduced Fred Stamp to it, I said, Fred was really excited about being in the Hall of Fame. I said, come on, Fred, you can't be that excited. You're only number 4 on this list. Okay? Religious leaders. Catholics, there are at least 9. I'll give you a couple examples. Margaret Brennan, of course, Bishop Schmidt, Bishop Swint, Bishop Hodges, Whalen, who's at the beginning of the movement, Father Lewis, okay, Joanne Gottner, who out at Montesano, thank you. And you have Protestant ministers. Bonnie Thurston was the last one. There was Willie Stinson. There were a couple women, Fillmore and Reed, and then 2, a father and son, Strider from Episcopal Church, father and son. So those are well represented. Now, I'm going to read you some things, and I want you to see if you can figure out the category. Marsh, Block, Raymond, Northwood, Stifel, Vance, West, Campbell, Schrader, Ehlenfeld, Lindsley, Ogilvy, Welty, Lachlan, Schiffler, Long, Hodges, Swint, Paul, Peterson, Frizzell, and Seibert. Things named for Hall of Fame members, whether they're buildings, streets, and these are some of the companies that are founded, besides the ones I listed. Crown Stogie, which was Pollock's, Valley Welding, West Banco, Aladdin Foods, Coronet Foods, Wheeling Electric, Wheeling Steel, Sterling Drugs, News Register, Intelligencer, Ziegenfelders. You know, that's how you can tell the history of Wheeling by looking at the Hall of Fame. See, these are the things that are being done. Politicians. There are only 6 politicians, which, just because you're elected to something doesn't make you an outstanding. In fact, I can think of a whole bunch of people elected recently that wouldn't be on anybody's list of honor. Jack Fahey, Ehlenfeld, Hubbard, Seibert, Herndon, Sweeney. Okay? Educators, though. 17 educators. People who make a difference in the lives of others. Some of these names you'll know very easily. Boner, who was superintendent in the high 50-some years, I think he was in education. Swint, the Striders, Kirkpatrick, Father Lewis, O'Leary, not Harold O'Leary, the sister O'Leary, Lauren Mercer, keep that name in mind, Mercer. Okay. Chao, Conley, Campbell, Brennan, Vale, Gauntner, Thomas. Okay. There are 3 times as many educators in the Wheeling Hall of Fame than there are pro athletes. And the pro athletes, I'm looking over there at a guy who should know all these. Howley, Gene Freeze, Rieger, Glasscock, Burkett, and a woman baseball player, Gasich. Okay? Could you go to, wow. Wow. See, I'd still be looking at that. Okay? And we're going to add one to this list this week. That's Steckles, who worked for, Wide World of Sports. And today, in our audience, we have a distinguished member of this group, Doug Hubb. He's sitting back there, and was a wonderful member of the Hall of Fame, actually. You can see on there. But that's, now in terms of overall knowledge, I think probably the best known person on this list would be Chuck Howley. And my guess is after that, it's probably Gene Freeze. The 2 baseball players are also, both of them, in the Hall of Fame. But so long ago that most modern people wouldn't, I think, understand them. Writers, only 3. See, can you name it? One's contemporary. Harchman, Millard, who lives in Canada, and Rebecca Harding Davis, who is long since demised. Okay? Singers, only 5. This is an interesting little thing, too. You have the O'Briens, brother and sister. Okay? You have Eleanor Stieber. And then you have the country and western couple. Yes. Now, I want you to notice Doc Williams. Can you see? Oh, here's the date. 1984. Where's Chicky? Oh, where's Chicky? She's coming on Saturday. Now, the country and western couple. And that's what the road sign says, right? You're on the Chicky. It took 39 years for Chicky to get there. Why? I have my suspicions. The fact that she was a woman might have something to do with it, but what can I say? But that will be rectified on Saturday. Movie and theater people. 4 of them. Ellis Dungden, I don't know if you remember Ellis. Ellis was very instrumental, not so much in the United States as in India. But if you've ever seen he did 2 wonderful films. Wheels to Progress, which was made about 1960. If you want to capture the essence of Wheeling in that period in our history, it's wonderful. I mean, it's just really well done. And for Liberty and Union, which was done about the Independence Hall, he was also involved with. Hal O'Leary, John Corbett, and Miss Bassett, are in that. How many have big statues? 2. And they're almost next to each other. Walter Luther, Augustus Pollock. And here's the connection. Augustus Pollock statue was put up through the impetus of the Ohio Valley Trades and Labor Assembly. And 2 years after Pollock's death, one of the men who was involved in raising funds for that was a man by the name of Valentine Reuther, who was Walter's father. So you have that kind of connection. There are 21. Can you stay on the sports? Most of these sports people are local. And you can see them, Mr. Block and DeVore and so on in the next page too. And Bill Van Horn. And I can speak. Coach Rowe. So we're sitting at the table in the Union and having a cup of coffee, and Coach Rowe was there. And I was a young faculty member back then. Somebody said, Coach, don't you have a class at 9 o'clock? Yeah, what time is it? Oh, 9:30. Oh, hell, I'll come back next time. Yeah. Interesting fellow. Scientists, we've had 3 good scientists. Don Mercer. Wait a minute, did we always talk about a Mercer? That was the father. Lauren Mercer. Okay. Harlan Smith worked at NASA, brilliant guy, and Mary Efron. Okay. Artists, 8 of them, 8 artists. The last one will come in this Saturday. A woman by the name of Wilkinson, who probably most of you have never heard of. Very accomplished artist. Studied with some of the best known painters, William Merritt Smith, for example, let's see, the ones an artist. We have one with us today. Right back there, sitting by himself with the hat, Bob Villamagna, who is known for being in the Hall of Fame, being known for a well-known artist in West Virginia, and who was smart enough to hire you?
Dr. Javersak.
Yes.
So I am, needless to say, I have to be here because I'm completely in debt to him for the rest of my life. So.
Oh. No, every once in a while you get one right. Musicians, got a lot of you. The Mercer, Drew Barry, and so on. Earl Summers, Cheo, husbands and wives. Surprisingly, we have one wife here. Mrs. Nutting and her husband are both in the Hall of Fame. On Saturday, the 2 stamps will be there. And then the Williams and the Sands and the Shanks, both of whom were very generous with their money. And can you go back to the philanthropy? Yeah, it's amazing. So you hear the Sands, Sands Crest. Okay. You're familiar with some of this is not Otto Shank, that's another relative. But Miss Gator, who lived next door to us, was her claim to fame was she was a dog trainer and chef. But when she died, she was 96. We lived next to her for 6 years. I think her request was close to $3 million. Okay? This woman, who never married, seems to me the amount of money that she donated to various causes was something like close to $20 million. Okay? That's really guarding your money pretty well. Parent and child. Seibert Farnsworth. Okay? Mercers, wait a minute. Lord Mercer, his son Don Mercer, and on Saturday, Dr. Bill Mercer. So that's another one of these little records. 3 members of the same family. Now, there are other fathers and sons, the Stifles, for example, J.L. Stifel and his son, George Stifel, who's also in, let's see, we put George Stifel right here. He's in philanthropy. We still give these Stifel scholarships. I mean, they're not scholarships, they're awards, because our daughter got a whole bunch of them. Yeah. Which was nice, because, yeah. Brother and sister, you're Bryans. Okay. Now, as I already said, we don't have any scandals yet, so we can dispense with that. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here. And if you would go to public service, please. Now, and I've known a lot of these. I worked with Todd Campbell, and I nominated and did his induction. I did her inaugural induction. I did hers. Okay. Rosemary Front, of course, lived in. Friends with her. Right here. If I were to list 1 to 65, 1 to 166, he would be number 1. Okay. Walter Reuther. Been dead for 53 years. Died in a plane crash. And let me give you some of the ideas that Walter Reuther came up with that eventually got into our lives. Peace Corps. Wait a minute, that's John Kennedy. Walter Reuther talked about the Peace Corps in a speech to the National Education Association in 1956. HMOs. He told the members, a couple guys on the owners of automobile companies, you're not sustainable the way you're doing your health care. You're going to run out of money. And you're not, he also told them that there has to be a better way of doing retirement funds. You're going to run out of money. Now, he was telling that in 1950. And that's why today a lot of companies don't offer retirement plans except through a 401k or whatever it is, K, B, I'm not sure which one. Not by the company itself. Anti-poverty program. Benefit packages. You know, there was a time when you could work for a company and they gave you no benefits at all. They gave you salary. When it was weird. I remember when they brought in the first dental plan for Weird and Steel workers. I was in high school, and we needed that dental plan. Trust me, because when my dentist retired, he gave me the record as having the thickest dental file of any patient. Yes. Fair hiring practices. Okay. And if you ever see a picture of Martin Luther King's March on Washington in 1963, one of the white faces in that march was Walter Reuther. And what you have to remember is that in 1963, it was still impossible for black students to go to the University of Alabama, most southern states. And Doug will tell you that in 1966, when the University of Kentucky was in the finals of the NCAA basketball tournament, they lost to a team from, who were mostly black. And somebody asked, Adolph Ruff was still the coach then, wasn't he? Well, Mr. Ruff, how come we don't have any black? Oh, I haven't met any good enough. You ever seen a modern Kentucky team play? Okay. The other thing is that Walter Reuther went out and took a stand that was probably opposed by most of the members of his unions, United Auto Workers. Okay. Two quotes. Reuther said, and I think this sums up what public service was all about in terms of the Hall of Fame. Progress with the community, not at the expense of the community. And I'll give you an example, not from Wheeling. Take a look at what happened to the city of Pittsburgh when they put in the first igloo, whatever that building was called up there, the hockey arena. They tore out somewhere upwards of 600 houses. Okay? How could they do that? Well, most of them were what? What? But you destroyed that whole, if you ever watched anything about the history of Pittsburgh, they'll talk about Wiley Avenue and why Wiley Avenue was such an integral part of Pittsburgh and the jazz scene and so on. Eliminated. See, that's what we do with urbanization. We often take the worst neighborhoods and eliminate them. You're not going to do something else. And if you go down to the river, down at the Heritage Port, you'll run into Walter Reuther's statue, who was not put up by the city of Wheeling. It was put up by United Auto Workers. Okay? And Jean was on that committee. She spoke at that event. At the luncheon, I was the speaker for that thing. That goes back, Jean, to 2006. I know, we were just young. But there is a quote at the bottom of Reuther's statue, and this is what it says. There is no greater calling than to serve your brother. There is no greater satisfaction than to have done it well. And on that, I thank you. And I'm on time.
Questions?
Oh, questions.
Always questions.
Not going to be a test. I just want to say, you did a lot of work on that, and that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
I was as fascinated doing the work as, when you look at the pictures, that doesn't tell the story. Could you go back to the other, who's going to be the program for?
Yeah.
This is what's going to be on Saturday. Again, to prove my point about old, deceased, 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 deceased. Okay? And the youngest person being inducted would be Bill Mercer, who's 7. Okay. Yes. And here's the program. The Daryl Cummings, Master of Ceremonies, and he is a wonderful Master of Ceremonies. If you ever need a Master of Ceremonies, just look in the book under Master of Ceremonies, and then one day we'll have the introduction, and yeah, I mean, really a nice event. And we're up to, there'll be 200 and some guests who will be there. So, any other questions?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. And the biggest reason why I love being a Wheelingite is because I have known so many of these people, not like a hero, but somebody I pass on the street and stop and talk to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. They're human. They don't look down on people. They accept people. Yeah. And I can think of some wonderful examples of that. The one that always comes to my mind first, because I worked with him for so long, is Clyde Campbell. Because when Clyde was president, there were some times when he dealt with people who I thought, there's no way I do this. I'd punch him in the nose. But he was always a gentleman. You know, and everybody has humanity. And that's one of the things that you'll find about a lot of those folks. That's why they end up being so good. Is they realize that their lives are not just about them. I mean, Augustus Pollock, for example, gets a statue put up to him by his workers. Businessmen weren't allowed to contribute. It took them 10 years to collect that money. That's a sign of respect. That's a sign that, hey, this guy's important. He may be the management side, but that's okay. He was a good guy.
I have one more comment. I really believe that it would not diminish this group we've seen if we added some of the heroes who made Wheeling known all over.
Well, we have changed the bylaws. For example, back to that.
Which one?
What do we have before the program?
He's sleeping on the job.
That's all right. Okay. For example, Bob Botten. I don't know if some of you are familiar with Bob Botten, but Wheeling Amateur Hockey Association, that's Bob Botten. Festival of Lights, Bob Botten. Well, he's been dead since '05. Well, how come he's not in there? Because Bob Botten lived in this house, and the city limits were here, a couple hundred yards away. That's it. And the law said you had to be in Wheeling. That was changed. J.D. Chambers. Ever been around Wheeling and see how many things say J.D. Chambers this, J.D. Chambers? He never lived in Wheeling. He lived, yeah, but he spent all his money here. All his, Beverly Flutie. Is there anybody who's gotten more from the history and Beverly Flutie? And why wasn't she in until then? Because she lived out on a little bit outside on a farm outside of Wheeling. And that wasn't fair. So that's been changed in terms of that. But to be on the board itself, you have to be a resident. That's why Doug was on the board and moved, and he had to resign. Okay? Which his whole career has been basically. So. Any other questions?